The boy sat at his computer, immersed in his third attempt at surviving the zombie apocalypse. Confidence surged through him as he secured a bat, convinced it was the smartest choice in a world where ammunition was scarce and guns only attracted more undead. In his mind, a bat would always be the weapon of survival. A sudden flicker on the screen jolted him, and the lunatic performer threw himself into a reverse push-up on his chair. The stunt cost him only 76 cents, yet his triumph ended abruptly as he crashed to the floor, smacking his head like a fool. At that same moment, Chiansu rose and demanded to know if the reckless boy had enjoyed that. The one called Only One accused him of playing carelessly, reminding him he had already died. The realization hit. The character on screen had been killed. Embarrassment forced him to apologize to the livestream, though he quickly brushed it off, relieved he had at least reached a checkpoint. With the new item secured, the next run would be easier. Meanwhile, Only One taunted Chiansu, asking if this truly counted as fun when he was the only viewer in the stream. A brief silence fell. Chiansugyo, the streamer, admitted he survived off live streaming solely because this same viewer never left. Only One questioned the truth of that claim, then declared that if it was true, he chose him. Chiansu, baffled, accepted the odd proclamation with hesitant gratitude. The mood shattered as the entire room began to shake. He leapt to his feet, startled, moments before a deafening explosion rattled the city. Racing to the window, he saw fire consuming buildings and terrified crowds fleeing through the streets. He announced the chaos to his live stream, yet his computer shut down without warning and refused to power back on. Confused and unsettled, he abandoned the darkened machine and stepped outside. A woman bolted past him, and when he called after her, she only glanced at his face before sprinting away in panic. Bewilderment set in, only to deepen when glowing messages materialized in the air before his eyes. Some lines mocked him, calling him pathetic. Others questioned why anyone would choose such a loser. His chest tightened as the realization struck. This was a chat window floating in front of him. Panic set in when the words began echoing his own speech, the viewers ridiculing him by repeating everything he said. He reached for the strange projection, thinking exhaustion had driven him into hallucinations, but the stream's voices only laughed louder. More messages scrolled across his vision. Some told him he couldn't touch it. Others warned that something was already on its way. That was when he finally noticed it. A zombie standing right in front of him. The chat exploded, announcing his inevitable death and mocking the sheer horror of watching a player so hopeless. His mind refused to process the situation before the creature lunged, forcing him backward. Instinct saved him. A wild kick pushed the monster away just enough for him to scramble to his feet and flee. The stream viewers taunted him, claiming the zombie only wanted a handshake, but desperation drove him onward. He bolted toward his apartment, frantically punching in the entry code. Glass shattered behind him as the undead broke through, its blood-soaked face pressing closer with every step. He stormed up the stairwell, heart hammering, yet no matter how fast he climbed, the thing refused to fall behind. By the time he reached the 7th floor, the gap hadn't widened at all. A door to the roof appeared ahead. He tried it. It was locked. Panic spiked as the zombie advanced up the stairs. The chat jeered, telling him to stop being an idiot and simply push. He shoved with all his weight, and the door finally gave way. Throwing himself through, he slammed it shut, bracing it with his own body as the pounding began on the other side. For now, he could breathe. On the rooftop, questions spun in his head. Why had a zombie suddenly appeared? Why was a game-like chat hovering in front of his eyes? Still, he shoved the thoughts aside. Survival came first. And to survive, he needed a weapon. A noise behind him snapped his focus. A chubby figure advanced across the roof, someone he recognized, the building's owner. He broke into a sprint, only to trip over a stray box and crash hard to the ground. The monster was already upon him. Pinned and struggling, he spotted the streaming chat again. Someone claimed a supply chest was nearby. His gaze darted sideways. There it was. Summoning his strength, he kicked the zombie back and dodged as it charged again. Shinsu hurled his weight to the side, cursing the creature, and by sheer chance, or instinct, it launched itself off the roof, plummeting into the void. The chat immediately debated whether it had been dumb luck or calculated genius. Exhausted, he collapsed, but there was no time to rest. More pounding rattled the door. He counted 3 sets of hands trying to break through. The chat sneered that countless beginners met their end like this. Then his eyes locked on the glowing chest. Memory struck. The earlier comment about a supply box. A grin split his face as he flung it open. Radiant light poured out, revealing a prize, a legendary bat. The chat dubbed it the Excalibur of the Apocalypse. The door cracked open, and the undead spilled through. Shinsu steadied his grip, determination burning. The viewers placed bets on how quickly he would die, but he smiled anyway. To him, the apocalypse was nothing more than another game. He charged, swinging the bat. The strike missed the first zombie completely. Surrounded, he whipped the weapon back and forth in panic, yelling at the creatures to back off. The chat roared with laughter, branding him a clown. And still, the real problem closed in. The zombies were too close, packed so tightly that the legendary bat couldn't even move the way he needed. Pinned down, he tried to restrain one zombie, but another closed in from behind. Instinct took over. He released the bat and hurled himself to the ground, narrowly avoiding a bite. The creatures crowded him, the space too tight for swinging any weapon. Forced into a desperate gamble, he wriggled free and broke through the horde. Against all odds, he slipped past, leaving the chat stunned at his sudden burst of skill. Back inside his room, the flood of comments shifted. Viewers admitted he was more impressive than expected. Yet Qiansu quickly realized the grim truth. Both his computer and his phone were dead. When the chat demanded to know where he was going, he focused on one thought: reaching his parents' house. Without hesitation, he mounted his bike and sped away, age doing nothing to slow him. The commentary scrolling across his vision was ignored now. Only family mattered. Checking the fuel gauge mid-ride, a blur shot across his path. The bike toppled and he skidded to the ground. Messages spiked, asking if that thing had been a tongue. Confused, he turned, and the chat supplied an answer: a hellish frog. Shock struck. This wasn't a zombie. It was a monster, alive and real. His disbelief lasted only seconds before a whip of tongue lashed out. He dodged, and another stream comment appeared. A ruler materialized alongside it, sparking an idea. Sprinting into a tunnel, he used its sharp turns to evade the creature's strikes, buying himself precious seconds. Some of the supplies he had carried still survived the crash. Cornered again, he gripped a Molotov tightly, daring the frog to advance. The chat praised his nerve as the monster charged with a violent headbutt. He dodged and hurled the flaming bottle, but the fire clung uselessly to the creature's hide. Frustrated, he lit another and smashed it into the beast's face. Still, the thing fought on, confirming his suspicion. Its weakness lay within, not without. With only one Molotov left, he had no choice but to risk everything. Hidden behind a wall, he goaded the beast closer. The tongue lashed. He rolled aside, and with perfect timing, jammed the last bottle straight into its gaping maw. Flames erupted from within, twisting the monster in agony before it collapsed. The chat exploded with awe, recognizing the recklessness and brilliance of the move. Breathing hard, he declared it finished, though the messages warned him not to lower his guard. Some voices hailed him as one of the best beginner players they had ever seen. He frowned, questioning why they described his life as though it were a game. But in the end, he chose not to care. Real or not, he would accept it. He vowed not to die like an idiot. At that instant, a notification appeared. An achievement unlocked, along with a new ability, the power to record his feats. Staring at the glowing message, he was certain of it now. This was no ordinary reality. It was exactly like a game. And so, he ordered the skills panel to open. The aggro skill granted him greater power the more creatures surrounded him. The save record skill allowed fragments of that strength to solidify as permanent attributes, ones he would always carry. The realization struck. This ability demanded he hurl himself into danger to grow. He shut the panel, set the thought aside for now, and returned to his mission of finding his family. The wreckage of the frog had left his bike destroyed, forcing him to continue on foot. When he finally reached his home, disbelief gripped him. The house looked as if a colossal beast had taken a bite straight out of it. He stumbled inside, calling for his parents, desperate for a response, but the rooms echoed hollow and empty. Memories surfaced. His parents always left notes. He scoured the house, searching, until in his own room he found a scrap of paper. His father's handwriting declared that they had evacuated with soldiers from Division 7.5 and that they would meet again soon. Relief came with caution. At least now he had a lead. The chat ridiculed him, sneering that even his parents had abandoned him. He muttered to himself, unsettled. Something about the message felt off. It wasn't quite like the notes his father usually left. But if this was truly a game, maybe this marked the beginning of the first main quest. For now, he held back. With only one clue, rushing would be reckless. He rummaged through the cupboard and uncovered canned sardines. The chat mocked his calmness, but he brushed it off, deciding to eat first before choosing his next step. Then, noise. Something stirred near the house. Creatures shouldn't be here. Another sound echoed through one of the rooms. He moved carefully, following it. At a window, a zombie clawed its way up. He struck its hand and slammed the frame shut. Instantly, the aggro skill triggered. 1 enemy in 10 minutes. The reminder hit him. Each pursuer added 10% strength. Testing it seemed the only option. At another door, he smashed the zombie breaking through, bringing the count to 2. Excitement surged. He pushed further. At a third door, another fell. Then the 4th, the 5th, 6th, and 7th followed. He didn't stop until all of them lay silent, their struggles stilled. Gazing at his own hand, he could feel it. His body was undeniably stronger. But then came another sound, this time from the kitchen. His aggro window was running down, only a minute left. He crept forward, tension biting at him, while the chat speculated on who would come out on top. Peering under the table, he discovered not a creature, but a man crouched in hiding. Moments later, the stranger, apparently a restaurant worker, was already cooking. The chat erupted, calling him insane for allowing a stranger to prepare food in his own house. The protagonist had no idea how to address the endless stream of messages, so he simply called them brothers. He explained his situation, fighting monsters on an empty stomach, and made it clear that if the stranger in his house turned hostile for even a second, he would be dealt with immediately. The long-haired man placed a plate on the table. Chiansu, regaining his strength, admitted the food looked surprisingly good. The man claimed to be a chef from Mayong restaurant. Chiansu pointed out that the noise he had caused earlier had forced him to face a swarm of zombies. The stranger bowed his head, apologizing, desperate not to be thrown back outside where the dead waited. Chiansu finished his meal and said he would leave soon. When asked where, he answered that he was searching for information about his father. The stranger suggested the local elementary school, which had been converted into an emergency shelter. Chiansu considered the idea. Perhaps it really would be the best place to gather clues. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Was this man even real, or just an NPC scripted to guide him along? In the end, he accepted the suggestion. The man introduced himself as Mingyu Zhang. Chiansu thanked him for the food and said it was time to move. When asked about transport, Mingyu admitted he had none. Chiansu told him they could use a bike from the garage, then returned to his room to gather supplies. He grabbed a hammer, only to be interrupted by a scream. Mingyu's voice. Chiansu bolted outside. A massive titan-like zombie had Mingyu in its grip, the man thrashing helplessly. The chat identified it as the big mouth type, stronger than even the frog-like abominations. Some claimed it must have been the creature that had bitten his house earlier. Panic surged. He sprinted, but the comments screamed warnings. If he tried to save Mingyu, he would die. The next heartbeat, he was already on the bike, fleeing. When he looked back, the towering monster was chasing, a timer appearing above. 10 minutes. He pushed harder on the pedals, but the creature was fast. Too fast. At this pace, it would devour him before he could escape. Then he spotted it. Another bike, Mingyu's, lying where it had been dropped. 2 more zombies clung to him now. In a reckless dive, he hurled himself toward the spare bike, mounted, and tore forward, the monster's claws swiping just behind him. The chat went wild with disbelief. But the danger wasn't over. The beast was still at his side, jaws wide, hunger endless. And Chiansu declared through the stream of comments that he wasn't the type to collapse without a fight. The scene shifted to the shelter, where a group of soldiers and civilians were pushing the last stragglers through the gates of the elementary school. A heavy-set man shouted that Mingyu was still out there and begged them to mount a rescue. Another dismissed him coldly, saying Mingyu was probably dead, and urged him to get inside before it was too late. Arguments rose among the crowd, some demanding the gates stay open a little longer. Among them, a man in a white bandana nudged his companion, insisting they slip through the entrance while they still could. Then the roar of an engine cut through the chaos. A motorcycle approached at high speed, its rider dragging attention with him like a storm. The crowd turned, eyes widening as Chiansu braked to a stop. The man who had been causing the commotion recoiled in fear, staring at what Chiansu carried on the back of the bike. Whispers spread, speculation turning dark. Was it a body? The rider grinned, feeding the unease. The chat erupted, claiming he lived only to draw attention. One man recognized the vehicle immediately, Mingyu's bike. He demanded to know how Mingyu was. Qiansu answered flatly, dead. Confusion followed, voices demanding more explanation, but he offered none, only asked who led the place. Before anyone else could speak, a man stepped forward wearing a police department badge. He introduced himself as Sujin, the officer coordinating the evacuation. Qiansu gave his name. Sujin's eyes narrowed when he noticed what Qiansu carried, fragments of the monster. He asked directly if that was truly a piece of it. The boy was startled by the knowledge, and Sujin explained they had lost many people to that beast. He wanted to know what happened. Qiansu's response was blunt. He killed it. The claim froze the crowd. Disbelief spread like wildfire. Killing such a creature was beyond imagination. The memory of the fight replayed in his head. The bike racing, the beast tearing buildings apart like toys, the chat hurling doubts and mockery. He had asked if they wanted to bet on his survival. They demanded to know the wager, and he had answered, his life. The monster had chased relentlessly, showing no fatigue, while Qiansu forced a promise from the spectators that if he lived, they would owe him. The chat had jeered, claiming there was nothing to gain and that failure was certain. Only one voice, that same strange viewer from before, accepted the deal. With a reckless grin, Qiansu had sped for the tunnel. The creature, massive and unstoppable, slammed into it at 100 miles per hour. Now back at the shelter, he told Sujin he would explain later, and added that he was also looking for a safe place. The guards wanted to check him for infection before letting him in, but the civilians pushed back, declaring him a hero who deserved immediate entry. After inspection confirmed he was clean, he prepared to leave, only for someone to call after him. It was the man from earlier, asking again if Mingyu had really died. Qiansu repeated himself and demanded to know if the man had been close to him. The man admitted he was the owner of the restaurant where Mingyu had worked. Qiansu explained curtly. They had made a plan together, but the monster had shattered it. He reminded the man he hadn't stolen the bike nor anything else, and had no reason to be accused. Then he added one last detail, that the tofu soup Mingyu had cooked would stay in his memory forever. The chat mocked him viciously, claiming he had forced the poor man to cook only to play righteous now. The restaurant owner was left speechless as Qiansu swung onto the bike once more. Without another word, he left the shelter behind. As Qiansu neared the school, a blue suitcase lay abandoned on the road. A message materialized before his eyes. He was leaving the tutorial. From now on, the information panel would be his only lifeline. What froze him wasn't the panel itself, but the word tutorial. Other messages poured in, announcing that this was where everything truly began. He rushed into a room, demanding answers from the strange figure known as Only One. There was a limit to how much he could endure while stumbling blind, and he reminded him of their bet. The time had come to pay up. The enigmatic voice asked what he wanted, and Qiansu pressed for an explanation. The chat boiled with rage, furious that he ignored the rest of them. They demanded to know if he had received any guidance at all. He admitted none. Their disbelief grew. Survival without instructions seemed impossible. They wondered how he appeared to know so much, and he muttered that it was nothing but streamer instinct. The comment caught fire, an odd, intriguing detail. Then someone claimed that winning the game meant rebuilding the world however he wished. Confusion followed, but only one confirmed it. The truth unraveled. This world was real. Only a few details had been altered, but Qiansu was the lone player. The rest were nothing more than NPCs, shadows of reality designed to fill the stage. The group followed only one protagonist at a time, and now it was him. Only one advised him to stop stressing about what was real and instead treat them as an audience. Keep putting on a show and keep winning. The weight crushed him. He asked who they truly were, glancing sideways, almost suspecting divinity. Staring at his reflection, he even wondered aloud if Only One was a god. The response came sharp and dismissive. What kind of character wasted time on such thoughts? A hint followed. They favored those who put on a performance. If he wanted their support, he would have to go all out. It felt absurd, an impossible mission for someone who had barely lived outside his room. But then he remembered the information panel and opened it. The first mission appeared. Protect the police chief. If that man died tonight, the entire city would collapse into ruin. Outside, he observed the camp. People gathered in the courtyard while police organized supplies. Voices barked orders. Others stacked food. Among the 150 survivors, Qiansu already knew one of them was a threat to the chief. The officer announced food distribution, calling people closer. Someone shouted for Qiansu, but he brushed them off, saying he was fine. Instead, he approached another man and asked about the chief. The officer flinched, unsettled by the question. His hesitation reeked of secrets. Suspicion cut deep. Qiansu demanded to see the department chief, Sujin Li. The officer exchanged whispers with others, clearly seeking permission. Finally, he asked Qiansu if he had really killed the monster. When the boy confirmed it, the officer relented. The truth came out. They were desperate for people with his strength. The police chief had gone on patrol and vanished. Shock hit. The mission wasn't about protecting a leader already here. It was about finding him before it was too late. Qiansu demanded to know why no search parties had been sent. The officer explained their forces were too thin, torn between guarding the survivors and scouring the city. Qiansu pushed further, insisting he be allowed into the chief's office. With more information, his chances of success would grow. Nervous sweat ran down the officer's neck, but at last he agreed. Inside the temporary office, Qiansu urged the chat to keep their eyes sharp for clues. Nothing appeared, until he spotted a map. A mark stood out. The location wasn't far. Then footsteps behind him. He turned. A man stepped in, claiming he had heard about the boy searching for the chief. His hand extended for a shake, praising Qiansu for defeating such a powerful monster. He introduced himself as Gaeyong, though the handshake was no greeting. It was a test of strength, a crushing grip designed to dominate. The chat mocked Qiansu, branding him weak. He bit down his irritation, wondering what this jerk's game was. Before he could respond, a scream tore through the camp. Everyone rushed outside. Chaos unfolded in the courtyard. Among the survivors, infected figures writhed and snapped, biting into the nearest victims. Once 2 or 3 fell, panic spread like fire. People tried to flee, but escape was gone. Qiansu's eyes widened. He didn't understand how infection had breached the shelter, but the chat knew. They warned him. The entire place was about to collapse into madness. Qiansu tightened his grip on the hammer, knowing the crowd needed help. The courtyard was collapsing into chaos, and the police hesitated. Firing their guns risked mowing down civilians. He cut through the mass, hammer swinging, dropping the first infected with brutal force. He barked at the officers to stop freezing up and use their own strength. Even the restaurant worker joined in, clutching a frying pan like a makeshift weapon. The man with the white bandana warned Gaeyong to watch himself, but Gaeyong had already stepped forward, swinging the pan into the skull of an infected. Qiansu tore down 2 more, clearing space. Gaeyong noticed it. Qiansu was buying time for him to finish the job. Accepting the unspoken pact, he slammed the pan again and again until the police finally snapped out of their paralysis and joined the fight. The survivors screamed to open the gates, desperate to flee, but the locks held firm. To Qiansu, that sealed it. Someone had deliberately let an infected inside. Only someone with authority could have pulled that off. In his mind, the traitor had to be one of the police, a man gone insane. He told the live stream he wouldn't waste energy on this now. The chief was his real target. He strode to Gaeyong, telling him to keep his eyes on the officers. Gaeyong was left confused, but Qiansu said there was no time to explain and framed it as repayment for Mingyu's kindness. Then he bolted. A policeman tried to block his way, but Qiansu brushed past, telling him to worry about himself. He grabbed the bike, mounted quickly, and told the chat that staying would only sabotage his mission. The marked spot on the map gnawed at him. Something was hidden there. The ride ended at a lonely container deep in the forest. Through the windows, no bodies, no movement, only the floor covered in a mess of footprints. Too many. Maybe a horde had passed through. He turned to the chat, demanding to know when his next supply chest would drop. They mocked him, saying this was hard mode. He snapped back that it was already unbearable and he needed support. They joked about paid content, claiming he had to invest real money. Confused, he scrolled the chat and found the $sign. Clicking it revealed donations were disabled. The chat pressed him to turn it on. He did, and unlocked monetization. Immediately, only one tossed him a single zen. 2 others added 2 more. Rage boiled. Those bastards had hidden this system just to watch him struggle. Forcing it down, he entered the container. Inside, it was nothing more than an ordinary house, out of place in the wilderness. The chat teased him, asking if he was angry. He said he held no grudges, but he knew the truth. They were withholding far more than they revealed. Why had the map led him here, to this strange little house? The question weighed heavier than the hammer in his hands. The windows rattled as rotting faces slammed against the glass. Zombies had emerged from nowhere, startling him. Aggro activated instantly. The footprints hadn't been random. They were from a horde. The chat cackled, mocking his fear of friends, but the counter kept rising. 8, 14. His body surged with raw power, strength amplified by over 200%. If surrounded, he was still the one in control. Then a horn blared. Headlights cut through the chaos. A car swerved toward him, forcing him to roll aside. Behind the wheel sat the same scum who had lured the zombies into the school, Guyon, hiding behind the glass, but his presence unmistakable. Rage burned in his eyes as he realized the kid was not only alive but cutting down the dead like it was nothing. Guyon gunned the engine, vowing to grind him into the dirt. Tires screeched. The vehicle hit something, jerked to a stop, but it was only a zombie crushed under the wheels. A knock on the window froze him. Chiansu stood there, hammer raised, his arm shooting forward to smash the glass. The elbow strike shattered it in one blow. At this strength level, Guyon had no chance. Desperate, Guyon grabbed an airsoft gun and fired, but the shots whizzed harmlessly as Chiansu ducked low. Guyon stomped the accelerator, trying to flee. Checking the rearview mirror, his blood ran cold. The kid was chasing him on foot at 80 miles per hour. The chat roared that Chiansu was furious. Guyon cursed, determined to teach him a lesson. He swerved into a maze of containers, hoping to lose him. Chiansu closed in. Guyon reached into the glove box, pressed a hidden button, and smirked. The containers cracked open, spilling out a swarm of zombies. The chat declared him finished, but the aggro counter hit 40. His body now surged at 5 times its normal capacity. 2 minutes. That was all he needed. The first zombie crumpled instantly. Then another. The sequence ignited. Swing, crush, repeat. Still, the swarm was endless. His gaze locked on Guyon, parked under a tree, fumbling with his phone. Chiansu sprinted, smashed through the side window before Guyon could react, and pinned him in place. The demand was simple. The police chief's location. Guyon's hand twitched toward his waist, but Chiansu caught it, slamming it down. The chat warned of his other hand. He immobilized that one too. Guyon choked out questions, baffled by this monstrous kid. Chiansu's only answer was that he had the backing of countless fans. One brutal kick sent Guyon sprawling across the seat. Now behind the wheel, Chiansu claimed the car. Guyon, unconscious and drooling, slumped like dead weight. A pair of handcuffs glinted in the console. The chat joked he'd earn money by locking the bastard there. The idea amused him, until groans rose outside. The zombies were closing in. With a smirk, he cuffed Guyon and shifted gears. The engine roared. The car tore forward, plowing through the infected, crushing bone and flesh under its wheels. He cursed himself for not paying closer attention to the panel. The notification had clearly said from the start that Police Chief Mayong was at the food school. There was no reason to be here. Then, a blue teddy bear rolled across the asphalt, and instinct made him slam the brakes. The toy spun and hopped, dancing across the road. The chat laughed. Viewers joked about the creepy doll. The stuffed bear straightened and walked. For a beat, he froze, uncertain what to do. The tiny thing looked directly at him, then bolted into the trees. Only one explained. This was the only bear, not a regular monster, a guider to reward chests. Guyon stirred in the passenger seat, and the chat debated whether Chiansu would follow the bear. He grabbed a taser and ran a quick poll. 1 to keep Guyon out cold, 2 to shock him back under. The chat hammered 1, but he chose 2 and tasered Guyon into unconsciousness again. He climbed out and followed the little bear through the undergrowth until it led him to a chest. Opening it cost 5 zens. The shield icon hinted it wasn't a weapon. The chat prodded him to stop stalling and just open it. He ignored them and paid. Inside was a high-quality flashlight. Disappointed, he pocketed it anyway and turned back to the school. Back at the shelter, people spat about how stupid someone had been to let a zombie slip inside. Chiansu said he'd been there the whole time and ordered calm. A call pulled him aside. Something needed his attention. In a corner, men asked if they had contacted Guyon Go. They needed to reorganize the police. Chiansu suspected Guyon was behind the mess. He promised to handle the police chief himself. After all, the 3 of them were tied to this. What he didn't know was Guyon had been listening on the stairs. The bastards were plotting. Guyon saw men move toward the construction annex. There, someone found his jeep and Guyon, handcuffed and out cold. Realizing Chiansu had been right, he tried to reach the boy. but a hand slammed across his face. Chiansu had found him. Guyan stammered about the chief. He said the police chiefs were in the basement, guarded at the door. The scene cut to Chiansu pressed against that door, listening to voices inside. He watched a man prepare a taser while the chat suggested he'd earn a zen by kicking the door in. So he did. One brutal boot to the back sent the guard sprawling and earned him a coin. He rose, hand reaching for a weapon, then stopped. He told the man who he was, the remnant of humanity the officer had lost. The guard fumbled his gun, fired wild shots, then clicked an empty chamber. Chiansu smiled and pounded the man's face. One strike for Mingyu, another for the police. A final blow for everything that had happened. The chief lay unconscious. Chiansu demanded the keys. The guard groped for a taser at his belt, but Chiansu hammered it into his hand and zapped him instead, noting the damn things matched. He shoved the man and told him to say hi to Guyan. The chat pushed for blood, but Chiansu held back. More threats were coming. He pivoted and neutralized a passing officer with a swift, silent strike. The chat cheered the cold efficiency. Chiansu only scoffed that the man had been too loud. Coins chimed in the stream again. He felt the sharp lift of pride. From the doorway came a voice asking if he had really killed a cop. He turned, ready. It was time to finish this. He stepped forward and asked, offering a choice, how the man wanted to die. Arm, leg, chest, or the last option. He grinned at the sight of the terrified man, amused that someone who had shot him earlier now shook like prey. Another zen flickered onto the panel, and he gave a crooked nod as if to thank it. The man's screams stretched thin until they snapped into silence. The chat roared with laughter, mocking how he had sealed his own fate. Chiansu, half embarrassed, wondered aloud what that fool had been doing. Outside, a commotion stirred. Heads turned just as he stepped back into view, dragging the real police chief with him. Officers swarmed, shocked, as he announced the traitors were bound in the basement. They sprinted off to confirm, leaving him for the first time with the feeling that he had finally cleaned up the mess. The panel blinked its warning. Staying too long in one area was dangerous. By the next morning, he lounged full-bellied inside a cabin, reflecting on how drastically things had shifted in a single day. That warning gnawed at him, though, and when he asked the chat what too long really meant, their silence was deliberate. Uneasy, he stood before a car until the police chief approached, asking why he was preparing to leave. Supplies were offered, gratitude voiced. Chiansu remembered asking if the chief would simply expel the traitors, even after they had tried to kill him. The man had excused it. Hard to execute comrades, even treacherous ones. Chiansu cut it short, saying he would handle it himself. Soon, the car roared across the road, the two traitors tied in the back. Officers begged him to stop, but his mood was black. When the chat joked that he was fixing the problem, one of the men was already bitten. The car hit nearly 80 before braking hard. The back seat was empty, ropes loose. He muttered that an accident had taken care of it. Back at the camp, the chief thanked him. Chiansu accepted the supplies and the car, brushing off a request not to leave without goodbyes. He sat behind the wheel, fiddling with the flashlight. Its purpose remained a mystery. The chat told him to relax and wait. Reluctantly, he agreed and drifted to sleep. Cold ripped him awake. The air was off, yet frost coiled through the car. His pulse spiked when movement flashed in the rear view. A cloaked, skeletal figure sliding closer. The chat warned it had finally arrived. He stomped the accelerator, skidding through the road. Officers shouted after him, but he blasted past without slowing, cursing the chat for laughing instead of warning. The mirror cracked, glass scattering. The creature had vanished, or so he thought. It loomed by the window, rattling the glass until it shattered. He floored the gas, desperate to put distance between them. The chat demanded he flee to another region, or risk being trapped forever. The monster reappeared directly ahead. Steel pillars split his vision, and the crash came hard. Airbags burst, bruising him more than saving him. Staggering out of the wreck, he pulled his gun and fired. Bullets tore into bone but did nothing. The thing was immortal. Adrenaline drove him down a corridor, lungs burning, legs numb. The chat whispered that this looked like his last run. Shadows bent, and once again, the skeletal monster blocked the path. It lunged, jaws open, as the walls of the corridor swallowed them both. The flashlight flared, and the skeletal figure recoiled as if the beam itself could wound it. To Chiansu, the reaction made sense. Items like this always carried hidden value in a game. He seized the opening, dove out the window, and landed on a bicycle. The tire collapsed instantly, pitching him to the ground and tearing open his knee. Pain slowed him, and the creature closed in again. He hurled the flashlight as a distraction and sprinted, gun in hand, firing shot after shot. None of it mattered. The monster kept coming until a sudden line carved into the ground stopped it. Chiansu froze, realization dawning. That was the boundary. He steadied his gun, whispered that this would be the last shot, and pulled the trigger. The creature disintegrated, scattering into dust. His own strength failed him. He dropped hard to the ground, breath ragged, until a flickering light pulled his attention. It blinked rhythmically, almost deliberate. The chat screamed trap, but curiosity drove him closer. It pulsed like Morse code. A figure emerged, Minchul Yang, nervous, hands raised, insisting he wasn't a threat. Chiansu stripped him bare of gear, flashlight, and even clothes, indifferent to pleas about food and survival. The boy nearly broke down, swearing he had nothing left. Chiansu studied him with suspicion, wondering how someone so unarmed had lasted this long. He accused him of acting as bait, but the boy broke down further, confessing that cowardice had been his only armor. For once, the chat agreed he looked genuine. Reluctantly, Chiansu allowed him to tag along. Their first test came immediately. A monstrous frog pinned down another survivor nearby, its cavernous jaws snapping. Minchul guided Chiansu with sharp instincts, calling for sudden turns that sent the beast crashing into buildings. Near a stream, he repeated the tactic. Chiansu grinned at the boy's nerve, though he warned him not to overplay it. Together, they baited the frog along excavated ground. It stumbled, fell, then lashed out with its tongue. Chiansu timed the order, and both dropped low. The tongue swept wide, snagging the pursuing monster instead. Chaos exploded. The frog dragged its prey into its maw, furious and violent. The two creatures tore into each other, leaving Chiansu and Minchul free to escape. He finally understood. This kid survived not by strength, but by exploiting every chance to make monsters fight each other. Exhaustion hit later. Riding a tandem bicycle, Chiansu cursed the plan while Minchul urged him to keep pedaling. Their destination lay ahead, a resource-rich zone. Between breaths, Minchul asked about Division 7.5, saying he'd only found a note claiming his dead friends had joined them. The name stabbed deeper into Chiansu's mind, the same division that had taken his father. They reached a building just as a car nearly plowed into them. Chiansu abandoned the bike, furious, pounding on the window. Inside was a man, human, not infected. Yeonjun Cho. Chiansu ripped him from the car, dumped him to the ground, and tore through the vehicle's insides in search of weapons. Nothing. Yeonjun drew a knife in desperation. Chiansu crushed the attempt with a kick, stealing the blade. The man crumbled, begging forgiveness, swearing he had nothing. Chiansu weighed him, saw the look, and judged him a deserter. The soldier denied it, claiming his entire base had been wiped out. Minchul asked if he truly was a soldier. Chiansu barely spared words. Anyone could see it. Chiansu's gaze locked on something metallic at Yeonjun's neck. He yanked the dog tag free, demanding proof. The soldier stammered, sweat rolling down his face as he forced the numbers out. They matched, but suspicion lingered in Chiansu's eyes. He pressed further, asking about Division 7.5. Yeonjun swore he had never heard of it. Time was running thin. Minchul whispered warnings about danger, and Chiansu slid into the car, ordering them to scale the wire. He glanced at Yeonjun with contempt, questioning whether the man was even worth dragging along. Yeonjun begged, legs broken, helpless. The memory stung. Earlier, the same man had begged to be left behind. Now he confessed he had only feared betrayal. The chat mocked, certain Chiansu never saved anyone, but he snapped back, claiming it was unfair. He tossed the choice to Minchul, opened the gate if he wanted him. The boy complied, and the three of them pushed toward the building. The parking lot was full, 4 cars still there. Odd. Why was the gate locked? Caution weighed on him as they pushed inside. Silence clung to the halls. Yeonjun was hauled into the infirmary, while Chiansu slipped away to scout. Minchul panicked, clinging like a frightened child, but Chiansu brushed him off with half a promise not to abandon him. Upstairs, the chat threw out opinions, some saying the boy was genuine, others urging him to leave dead weight behind. He barely had time to consider before a voice caught his ear. A transmission. He burst through the door to find a nest of communicators, still alive with power. Static carried the message. Division 7.5 moving toward Jeju Island. At last, a lead. He pulled up the system's panel. The directive was clear. escape the city by train. He sprinted back, calling Minchul's name. The infirmary was empty save for Yeonjun. Rage boiled when he heard that the boy had gone to investigate strange noises. Chiansu cursed, demanding why he hadn't been stopped, then tore through the building in search. Keys. He needed keys. Only scraps of paper and an eerie detail. The lights were deliberately switched off, though power remained. Something was wrong. A scream cut the silence. He raced toward it. Yeonjun lay sprawled on the ground, rattled, muttering about noises from the basement. Then came the footsteps, heavy and deliberate, climbing the stairs. A stranger emerged, clutching Minchul like a shield. The boy shouted for Chiansu to run, but running wasn't an option. Knife in hand, he squared off, demanding the release of his companion. The man raved, sweat pouring, eyes burning with paranoia. He claimed Minchul was a thief who had broken into his company. He accused them both, spitting that all the drivers were gone. Chiansu understood then. No drivers, no keys, no escape. This madman had stripped his own company of them. Yeonjun cowered. The company owner shook, consumed by delusion. Chiansu's words shifted, sharp and fast, spinning a lie. He wasn't a thief, he was a driver, one of the best. A new recruit here to help, eager to serve in the middle of this chaos. The chat buzzed, confused, watching the charade unfold. The owner, already fractured, faltered. He muttered about needing drivers, then demanded to see a resume. The company owner's delusion caught Chiansu off guard. An interview, a resume, madness wrapped in formality. Chiansu played along, claiming he had already brought one and sending Yeonjun to fetch it. The owner praised his dedication, wanting a job in the middle of this hell. Yeonjun returned clutching a sheet of paper, saying it was the closest he could find. The man stared blankly at it, and that was enough. Chiansu barked for Minchul to move. He rammed the deranged CEO with a shoulder and snatched Yeonjun's crutch, smashing it into the man's body. Minchul followed orders, pinning his limbs while Chiansu ripped the keys free. Moments later, they bolted for the car. Yeonjun was thrown into the driver's seat, and the order was simple: head for the train station. But the street dissolved into chaos. People scattered in terror, marked with a grotesque eye on their backs, fleeing from a massive spider thing that blotted out the road behind them. Chiansu's gut tightened. Yeonjun floored it, clueless, steering blind as the monster closed in. The company owner broke free in the back, shrieking about his taxi. Chiansu ordered a sharp turn, and Yeonjun spun the vehicle back toward the main entrance. The deranged man screamed for his precious cab until it came barreling forward with the monster snapping at its heels. They drifted hard, and the creature smashed through a building as they shot down another street. Breathless, Yeonjun demanded to know if Chiansu had really used the man as bait. Chiansu, half spent, muttered that the CEO had turned out to be useful after all. Minchul agreed. Sometimes survival demanded ugly choices. Then the blue line appeared. They crossed it, and the system registered another checkpoint. Missions unlocked, riskier objectives promising better rewards. The chat exploded, hyping him up. The card maxer finally set to shine. Chiansu tested it, asking if Minchul could see the chat. The answer was clear. The boy couldn't see or hear anything when Chiansu spoke directly to them. No functions displayed, no explanations. The maxed-out viewer dropped a zen and promised he'd understand soon. Chiansu reached toward the panel, anxiety gnawing at him, when the sound of pounding footsteps cut the air. The creature was still after them, gaining fast. Chiansu urged Yeonjun to push harder, but the engine was already screaming. The spider thing moved quicker on straight roads, closing distance with each stride. He demanded another route, but Minchul shook his head. Pressed, the boy finally suggested the mountain road. Dangerous, slower, but a chance. They swerved uphill, the monster crashing behind them. Yeonjun warned of a sharp bend ahead. Chiansu demanded a plan, and Minchul's voice cracked. Just keep going. The creature wouldn't be able to brake in time. Chiansu turned to the chat, desperate for a mission. The replies mocked him, calling him doomed. Then the card maxer struck again. A new mission. Roll down the window, taunt the creature, and earn a buff to keep the car on track for 5 precious seconds. Chiansu didn't hesitate. The window dropped, and his voice ripped into the night. Vile insults, barbed laughter, daring the beast to kill him. The monster faltered, eyes locking on him. He piled on more venom, louder, harsher, until the mission cleared and the buff kicked in. The car held steady. For 5 seconds, survival was his. The curve sign flashed by and Yeonjun gripped the wheel. The buff snapped into effect, keeping the car glued to the road as the spider-like monstrosity was hurled from the cliff. It wasn't just a curve, it was a drop, and for once, the engineers who had built this road deserved respect. Against all odds, they survived the impact, the car rattling but steady. Yeonjun's knuckles stayed white, disbelief painted across his face, while Minchul sagged in exhaustion. Chiansu muttered his thanks to the maxed-out donor in the chat, only to be reminded that now he owed him one. Time passed. They rolled toward the station, but the sight that greeted them was eerie. The place was barren. No survivors, no movement, nothing but silence despite the radio message promising more. They stashed the car out of sight and approached on foot. Yeonjun worried aloud about zombies, but Chiansu dismissed it. He would handle it. Minchul hesitated, but Chiansu reassured him and then roared into the night, summoning the infected. 3 of them turned, shambling with hunger, and as they drew near, the strange counter ticked upward. Power 1.4. Strength surged through his veins. He cut them down with ease, the rush intoxicating, until one tried to slip behind him. His reflexes sharpened, his blade found its mark, and the creature fell without effort. The chat buzzed with praise, calling him brave, calling it growth. He spat at the screen, telling them to stop filling the air with such cringe. Still, he couldn't deny it. His body felt faster, sharper. Then came the sound of a man's desperate cries. A name spilled from his throat, familiar. The city's mayor. Chiansu narrowed his eyes, wondering if the man was connected. He asked the chat if saving him was worth it. Most screamed no. The maxed-out donor screamed yes. Chiansu decided he couldn't ignore it. The zombie toppled dead before it could finish the job. The man beneath wept and babbled. The mayor had abandoned him, tossed him out of a car, told him to scout, left him to die. He warned that this station was overrun and begged them to try another, but Chiansu pressed him for details. The mayor was inside, guarded by others. That was enough. This felt like a story mission. In front of the station, the survivor scanned for his friends and found nothing. Chiansu introduced himself, steady and cold. Chiansu Huang. The man stopped suddenly, pointing ahead. A figure in the dim light. A child. His mouth opened to call out, but Chiansu clamped a hand over it, furious. No child would survive here alone. Up close, the chat groaned about his cursed luck. He asked if it was truly that dangerous, demanding a reward. The chat offered nothing. Then the maxed-out donor dropped 100 zens. Chiansu froze. A single zen equaled 10,000 won. That meant nearly $700 had just landed in his hands. He squeezed the man's mouth tighter, grateful for the stake. The girl wasn't human. He would deal with her. But she turned. She ran. Panic overtook the survivor. He bolted down the stairs screaming and collapsed right in front of the lurking monster. His voice broke as he cried out that there was another one. Then it was too late. The beast tore into him, ripping him apart in seconds. Chiansu stared, confused by the stupidity of it, while the chat clarified with grim amusement. She wasn't a girl. She was a silent. The name alone gave it away. Silent Girl. A monster that hunted by sound. Chiansu froze as the system pulsed with a new mission from the one who called himself the new master. The rule was simple. He couldn't move until the creature passed. The reward was an ability to make someone deaf for 1 minute. High risk, high reward. The girl crept closer, her head tilting, her hollow stare brushing over him. Sweat poured down his temples, his body trembling, but he didn't flinch. The chat hissed, asking if she was looking directly at him. Seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, she drifted past. The mission cleared, and the new ability burned into his system. He crept to the fallen survivor's body, still intact. He rifled through the wallet for a name, confirmation of who he'd just failed to save. But as he turned, the corpse twitched, rising. Without hesitation, Chiansu struck it down a second time, cursing under his breath. No more delays. He sprinted deeper into the station, praying the silent wasn't nearby. Then he heard it, Minchul's desperate scream. A silent girl clawed through a bathroom door, hunting them. Chiansu paused, weighing the risk, tempted to turn away. The new master intervened again. Mission: rescue Minchul and Yeonjun. Reward: 20 zen. Too valuable to ignore. He ducked into a nearby diner. The chat jeered, asking if he was starving. He glanced at the timers in his hand. They didn't understand yet. He crouched low, watching the countdown. Inside the bathroom, Minchul and Yeonjun fought to hold the door as claws splintered wood. Then the beep sounded. The silent girls turned in unison. Chiansu burst into view, hurled the timer across the hall, then another, each one dragging the monsters further away with its sound. With the path clear, he pulled them out. Minchul collapsed in relief. The chat mocked him for not using the new reward ability. He still had the skill to deafen an enemy, but it required touch. To lay a hand on a silent girl meant being ripped apart in an instant. Useless here. That was when Yeonjun admitted his ankle was broken. Chiansu snapped at Minchul to help him, and the mission flagged complete. But the relief shattered when he heard a low groan. Yeonjun again. Only this time, his eyes burned with the sickly glaze of infection. His leg hadn't been broken. The bite had already spread. Chiansu's rage flared. All this risk, all this effort, only to end like this. He seized Minchul's arm and dragged him away. From a distance, he looked back at Yeonjun and muttered an apology. There was no saving him. They searched the train lines, finding no clear answers, until a sound caught their ears. Yeonjun stood nearby, pointing with a trembling hand. Chiansu turned just in time to see the train, still powered, impossibly functioning. Yeonjun sagged, muttering, relieving himself in defeat, but Chiansu stared at him with grim resolve. He swore he would never forget this man. Finishing the game meant honoring him, even if only as memory. At the station's edge, Chiansu gripped Minchul's shoulder. His voice dropped to steel. If the boy wanted to live, he had to listen. The train would not come empty. It would bring something with it, something they didn't want. Minchul nodded, fear wide in his eyes. The intercom crackled. An announcement rang out. The train was arriving. They crammed themselves into a wooden crate as the train thundered past. The roar shook the platform, dragging the monsters in its wake, carrying them away like dust swept by a storm. Relief came too soon. Another locomotive followed close behind. Someone had used the first train as bait, clearing the path for the second. Chiansu's gut twisted. That train was meant for the mayor. He bolted from hiding, ordering Minchul to stay put, and advanced toward the cars. The conductor stood at the front, but it wasn't the man who drew his eye. A woman's voice cut the air, demanding to know where the mayor was. Chiansu recognized her instantly. Suyeon Jang, once paraded online as a symbol of hope, now hard-edged and furious. She accused Division 7.5 of deception, her tone far colder than the polished interviews he remembered. Minchul slipped from cover, gripping his pipe, ready to strike her down. Chiansu halted him. Better to win her trust than fight. But Suyeon's eyes narrowed at the strangers approaching, already assuming they planned to steal the train. Chiansu produced the card, claiming to be mayoral security. She scoffed at the idea, doubting his strength, but he insisted he carried information too important to waste. The chat laughed, already predicting the chaos. Then he dropped the bomb. The mayor was dead. Her face froze. Monsters had been lured here for this? She demanded answers. Chiansu pressed the urgency. Leave now, or none of them would. She admitted she was under contract to recover the mayor, but relented. She would bring him to the shelter instead, so long as he explained later. Chiansu pushed for Minchul too, framing him as just a student. She agreed, though confiscated the pipe with sharp disdain. The train rumbled to life. Then Yeonjun appeared, limping down the stairs, alive. Chiansu muttered thanks. Survival owed to him. His relief shattered when a shove knocked him flat. More figures emerged. The mayor, screaming for the train to stop, clawing toward Suyeon, insisting she save him. She stepped out, shocked, until Chiansu pointed to the wave of silent girls tearing down the station. If they stopped, they all died. Her jaw tightened. She returned to the train. Behind them, the mayor cursed, his voice breaking as he spat that the code is the end. The mob of silent girls swallowed him whole. Chiansu asked the chat if that wasn't the better outcome. They agreed. Yeonjun was no longer the same. Chiansu told Minchul to get aboard. Inside the cabin, Suyeon's patience snapped. She demanded answers, or they'd be thrown out. Chiansu doubled down, insisting everything he said was true. The mayor was gone. She slammed him against the wall, spitting that he thought she was a fool. Chiansu admitted he never even met the mayor. Her fist struck his foot, making him stumble as she shouted for the truth. Cornered, he confessed. The card belonged to someone abandoned to die. He'd taken it to force his way through because the streets swarmed with creatures and survival left no space for honesty. She snarled that deception was still deception. He reminded her of her old interview, how she had called herself a light in dark times. He said he was one of those suffering people. Her face cracked. Anger shifted into embarrassment when he spoke her name. when he praised her as a beacon of hope. She flushed, claiming it was just a small article, hardly read by anyone. She turned away, her voice quieter, unsure whether he was mocking her or sincere. Finally, she relented. What's done is done. They would work together. Chiansu pressed one more time, asking if she guaranteed their course to Daijin. She confirmed. Then he brought up Division 7.5. Her expression darkened. During the apocalypse, she said, they were the ones responsible for... They don't get them. If they wanted me to save people, then just tell me to save people, but they put on some weird conditions. Right? Doesn't it seem strange? She've never heard of that unit before. Never met the person in charge. She've only talked to them through emergency channels. Wait, when did you drop the honorifics? She's 27 years old, he's older than me. He'll use honorifics then. He's 2 years younger. All right, definitely. It does seem suspicious. Then why does the 7.5 division need the mayor? Because the order is crumbling. That's why they needed him. The soldiers aren't listening. Wait, she doesn't know anymore because she only talked to them through the radio. They could have a lot more influence than I thought. Is it because they have a lot of pure-hearted citizens? He'll take note of that. He has to repay the favor for letting us on the train. As if you will. Hyung, Cheon-su Hyung. Why? What happened? Holy shit. Oh shit, that scared me. When did it get on? Maybe it was when they stopped. What's going on? Don't make noise. Is it confusing how empty the train is? It seems like it hasn't realized that we're inside here. What should we do? Should we get rid of it right now? Right here? No noises.